Good evening, everyone, and we're back with another edition of the Northeastern Bowl Rush with John Glowatz again. Glad to have him back on and just talking Northeastern Bowls. How are you feeling this weekend after just a tough loss? I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we recorded, but uh, just want to share your feelings.
Omar, I'm actually pretty ecstatic. Like it was a loss, but I felt like Penn State was the better team. I thought they're actually even better than I thought. And if Clifford's coming back, then I think we got a real shot at the playoff. If he doesn't come back, then it was never meant to be anyway, because you gotta have a better backup plan than just if your quarterback goes down, that's the season. So I'm actually feeling pretty good. And, we're starting to get college basketball, talking is going on. Season's coming up pretty soon. So this is my favorite time of the year, sports wise. We're just getting nonstop projections, talk, about bowls, about college hoops, the whole thing. I love it.
Yeah, and hitting the halfway point of the season before we even knew it. So some of these, projections are closer than we think. We already have some schools already bowl eligible. Like Coastal Carolina, Wake Forest, to name a couple, and whoever else is 6-0, UTSA. So yeah, just an exciting time and a lot going on. I'm not sure when the college basketball season starts for sure. Is that late October? Is that early November that the first games
are? I think it's gonna be early November. I think
Okay.
They're saying less than a month will be the actual opening games. So yeah, it's got to be early November.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, college basketball, a much better sport for the Northeast. So definitely a lot more to talk about there.
Yeah, for sure. But we've got some ball players in the old pigskin game as well.
Of course, yeah. And I guess without further ado, looking at some of these ball players and games in the Northeast, these bowl games. Begin with a few projections. A few projections have Houston at playing in the Fenway Bowl, and I feel like Houston is a sneaky 5-1 team, because all the attention the American is going out to SMU and Cincinnati. But Houston's got 5 wins. They've looked really good against Tulsa, really good against Tulane. And Rice, even though Rice is not as competitive, they've beaten who they've needed to beat for the most part and decisively. So to play in the Fenway Bowl, they typically have to be one of the best teams in the American to play against a power conference team. Do you see Houston keeping this up down the stretch? Or do you see them just, sort of fading and going to a different bowl, maybe a closer ESPN bowl in Texas?
I think Houston could do it. They, to me, are definitely the third best team in the American right now, with UCF pretty close. I think the advanced metrics have them somewhere in the mid 50s to 60s, as far as all teams in the country, and UCF slightly behind them. It's a pretty big jump from SMU in the top 25 to Houston, but I think they're pretty clearly the third best team. They've beaten the teams that they should. They've kind of beaten up on some of these lower ranked teams on the schedule: Tulsa, Tulane, Rice, as we mentioned. The quarterback Clayton Tune is kind of coming into his own a little bit. I think he posted almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against Tulane. So if he can really get going, I don't see why not. They can certainly beat most of the teams in the American, aside from Cincy and maybe SMU. But that's somewhat of a rivalry game there. So maybe all bets are off on Houston SMU. Maybe they can even take that one down.
Yeah, and I agree. The schedule looks kind of lean for Houston. I think the game that'll tell a lot about this Houston squad is not SMU, but the week before against East Carolina, because you don't know which East Carolina squad you're going to get each week. I feel like they're really hard to read, but a good performance could really, really show us what Houston's all about. In the American Bowl race. And again, the schedule's lean. They have South Florida, they have Temple as well, and they have UConn. So I see at least 8 wins there, maybe 9 if they beat East Carolina. Even Memphis too. This looks like possibly a 10-2 team, but a very sneaky 10-2 team with the other 2 teams in the American, the other 2 great teams in the American taking the spotlight in SMU and Cincinnati, which I guess it would merit them going to the Fenway Bowl. But I mean, again, it's a tough sell for a lot of the American schools.
Yeah, right on. But I think Houston's probably in the driver's seat for that Fenway Bowl. I'd be surprised if they didn't finish out the season in that third or maybe fourth spot in the American.
And I think factoring other things as well, looking at I guess final records and geography. If Houston ends up at 10-2, and I guess SMU as well, like those two teams look like they can be placed in the Frisco Bowl or any of the ESPN Texas Bowls against UTSA. I think it all depends on them landing in Fenway. I kind of do see UCF though, but I don't think they'd be a good match for some of the Power 5 schools that the ACC would place in the Fenway Bowl. But that's kind of my forecast to that. I feel like if those teams end up with 10 wins, ESPN is going to try to place them against UTSA in a Texas Bowl.
Could be right.
But I mean, yeah, ESPN does what it wants, as I've mentioned various times before. Like, who knows what ESPN does? It's like throwing darts in the dark. I mean, it really is. So I guess speaking of SMU, another projection that I've seen that was published was UNC versus SMU at Fenway. Do you see this as sort of a possibility with the sort of Sam Howell versus Tanner Mordecai quarterback duel in the cards?
Yeah, that could be a fun matchup. I think I think UNC is in for a bit of a rough go of it in the back half of their schedule here. The loss to Florida State is pretty bad. And I looked at their schedule quickly here. They might have the toughest remaining schedule in the ACC. They go at Notre Dame, home against Wake, who is good this year, number 16 in the country, at Pitt, who's maybe the top team in the ACC right now, maybe playing as well as anybody, and then at number 22 NC State. So, for a team that is certainly not looking like their preseason projections, that's as tough a slate as anybody has in the ACC. So, they'd be lucky if they're sitting at maybe 7-5 or 8-4 at the end of the season. So I think Fenway Bowl is definitely within scope.
And I mean, who would have thought, really? I mean, I know I had Sam Howell as my early preseason Heisman favorite, but the slide has just been ridiculous, really. I mean, kind of makes it seem like UNC were pandemic frauds, honestly, for lack of a better term. Honestly, I just don't see UNC making a bowl looking at that schedule. And I mean, just basing it off the FSU game, like I see them beating Miami, see them beating Wofford, but do they beat Wake Forest? I really don't think so. That defense is a liability out at Chapel Hill. NC State, maybe. I'm not as keen on NC State, I guess, beating Clemson. I mean, yeah, it was a huge win, but Clemson has huge liabilities on offense. And I mean, Clemson looks like a 9-3 team. So I don't know, maybe 6-6, I think is more realistic, but 5-7 is, I'd say it's 50-50 on them not even reaching a bowl. But with that in mind, with them being a 6-6 school, Fenway definitely does look in the cards, if not the Military Bowl. I did not see, I think I saw them in one projection for the Military Bowl against UCF.
Yeah, definitely could. They could lose bowl eligibility. I think the FSU loss is maybe a bit of an aberration. I don't think they're, that bad, but yeah, they're not going to be favored in too many games going down the stretch here.
And it's a shame because I mean, we thought that a lot of people thought that Mac Brown had the program in a great trajectory back to its 90s peak under Mac Brown. But I mean, who knows? He might be on the hot seat even next year, I guess, because his first year they were 7-6. Well, I guess maybe that's too bold of a take because his first year they're 7-6. Last year, I mean, they had the Orange Bowl appearance, and then this year they regressed again. I mean, I can't imagine that the leash is that long for Mac Brown considering his age. But I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think if they miss a bowl game this year, the seat might be getting real hot next year, especially if they start slow. if they make a bowl, it's certainly not going to be the lofty expectations that everyone down in Carolina had before the season. But I think it would be pretty tough to really, get that seat on fire early next year. But if I guess it all depends on how bad things get next year. Or we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. But definitely a disappointment. I guess a team that is not much of a disappointment, I guess. You can go either way on your opinion on them, but Virginia Tech, they have entered Fenway Bowl and Military Bowl projections. I'm fascinated with the projection in the Fenway Bowl because I think Mark Schlabach has them against Temple. They have Temple doing their Big East Revenge tour in Fenway Park. Seems great. Um, but Virginia Tech right now sits at 3-2. I do think they reach eligibility, but I think a lot of these games in the schedule are swing games, with the exception of the Miami game with Derek King out for the season. So, do you think the Fenway Bowl or the Military Bowl are good destinations, considering that in 2018 Virginia Tech went to the Military Bowl, and I guess there'd be other options available that haven't gone as recently as the Hokies?
I think Virginia Tech still has pretty good chance to to make a more prestigious bowl. I mean, you said they're at 3-2. They lost this last week to Notre Dame. Though it was pretty close. And even though I think Notre Dame is overrated at sitting at 14 in the country, I think it's not a bad loss. So I think this upcoming week, I believe they play Pitt. I think that's kind of going to be a real measuring stick for both teams. I think that's going to be the team kind of in control, at least in the early going here of division play of the ACC Coastal. So I think whichever team wins that game is sitting in a pretty good position to be making a bit of a more prestigious bowl. But certainly if it's Virginia Tech, then I could see them above the Fenway Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see them in, honestly, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, a bowl they haven't been in since 2016. Maybe even like the Gator Bowl as well, or I almost called it the Tax Slayer Bowl, but the Gator Bowl out in Jacksonville. But I feel like the Gator Bowl might try to approach Clemson because they travel well, and I don't think they've been to Jacksonville in a while. Or
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, I do agree with them going to a more prestigious bowl. But it's just hard to it's hard to look at what the bottom of the ACC bowl barrel is going to look like at this point, because I mean it's really anyone's game to get to 6 wins, honestly. I mean, with the amount of parity, especially in the Coastal Division.
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech will get well above 6. I have them pegged at maybe 8-4.
Yeah. I think that's very reasonable. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I guess continuing with bowls, we have Purdue going to the Pinstripe Bowl in a projection, and I really think the reason for that is that would hinge on Maryland or Rutgers, neither of them reaching bowl eligibility. Uh, do you think that is a likely outcome for the rest of the season? I think one of them reaches 6 wins, but it's hard to tell which one does.
Yeah, so between those 3 teams, I think probably only one reaches. I think Purdue is definitely out personally, and I think that that last game of the season between Rutgers and Maryland might come down to basically a sudden death elimination for bowl eligibility at that point, which would be awesome, to have a game with real stakes for that matchup. So looking at Purdue, they're 3-2 right now. The remaining schedule, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Ohio State, I think are all losses. I think they also lose at Nebraska, and then Indiana's a rivalry game, could go either way, but Indiana's, I think, the better team this year, depending on if Penix is healthy or not, and even if not, maybe they're the better team. So I think really the only sure win for them is Northwestern, and that's not going to get them to bowl eligibility. So I think they're probably out. Maybe they could squeak to 6 wins if they pull some upsets. Then Rutgers, they're at 3-3. I only see 2 likely wins on their schedule, or more than likely wins: Northwestern and Illinois. So that last game of the season, which is at home in New Brunswick versus Maryland, I think Rutgers will be favored, but it's going to be a close game, and then Maryland, they're at 4-2, so that helps them a little bit. They only need 2 wins. They've got Minnesota next at Minnesota. I don't think they're winning that. If they can't do that, then they have to beat either Indiana or Rutgers last game of the season to get the bowl eligibility. So of these 3 teams, I think only one is going to make it, and it's going to be either Rutgers or Maryland.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I don't know. I feel like Purdue always pulls off some upsets. Whether it's like 2018 against Ohio State. I don't know if they pulled any in 2019. But I mean, they look very competitive in the West. But I'm not too sure on Purdue. It's just really confusing, honestly, with all these teams. Like, they look so good in non-conference play, but I guess it just shows how top heavy the Big Ten is this year. I mean, especially in the West, with I think Iowa has a chance to clinch in the next 2 weeks, the Big Ten West, with how uncompetitive that division has been. So interesting race there for sure. I'm not sure if Purdue would travel well to New York, honestly. I'm not sure if there's a distinct Purdue alumni base in New York City, but there wilder things have happened.
It would be the most Purdue thing ever to beat Ohio State, pull that massive upset, and then lose to Northwestern, and still miss bowl eligibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like in 2018, when they beat Ohio State by 35 at home, that was the same year that they lost to Eastern Michigan. So no, you're 100% right. Like that's a total Purdue move. But yeah, like the Big Ten West, I think it's known for its parity, I guess. On a lower level in terms of bowl eligible teams, but it's really anyone's guess who becomes bowl eligible. Even Nebraska. I mean, I think Nebraska has a good chance of becoming bowl eligible. I haven't looked at their schedule yet, but they got to be the best 3 and 4 team in the country with the amount of close games they've played, and especially against good competition.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which I think makes this race between Rutgers and Maryland a whole lot more interesting if it does happen, is Sean Clifford is, well, we don't know his injury status at this moment. Last thing we saw was, he was out of the game versus Iowa, and the Penn State offense could do literally nothing without him in. So if he is injured for the remainder of the season, which I sincerely hope is not the case, but if he is, then that means that maybe those games for Penn State against Rutgers and Maryland turn out to be quite a bit more competitive than we would think if he were playing. So that in that scenario, I could see not only Rutgers and Maryland becoming potentially both bowl eligible, but also Penn State entering the conversation for the Pinstripe Bowl, because they might not win. They'll probably beat Illinois and probably still end up beating Rutgers and Maryland, but it's no guarantee. So they might end up at 7-5 or so, without Sean Clifford.
Yeah, and I mean that's a realistic scenario. I don't know. I kind of want to say that they would beat Maryland too, because if you look at, I guess, Maryland's wins, they really haven't beat anyone. Like, they stacked up on non-conference wins, and I think one weaker opponent in non-conference play, which was Illinois, and they barely beat Illinois right there. So I'd even give them the game against Maryland without Clifford if that's the case, but definitely realistic to see them in the Pinstripe Bowl too, because they haven't appeared in that one, since 2014. It's been a while, and even then they packed the house. Granted, Boston College was the other team, but the Pinstripe Bowl is a hard sell for Big Ten and a lot of ACC schools too. So I mean, why not pack the house with White for Penn State? So definitely a realistic scenario. Speaking of Boston College, that reminded me. So some projections for Boston College had them going to the Duke's Mayo Bowl and just not going to the Fenway Bowl this year. Do you see Boston College finishing strong and going to, I guess, a more prestigious bowl than the Fenway Bowl, excuse me. And even being shipped out to, I guess, the ACC's more Western bowls, whether it be the Sun Bowl or the Holiday Bowl.
Unfortunately, I just don't see it for BC this year. With Dracovic going down, I don't know if they're finishing strong. I mean, I guess the ACC is so insane. Yeah, who knows what could happen. But if I were a betting man, I would say probably not finishing strong. I would guess with the running game getting going and what's the backup, Grossel is his name or something like that, coming in there doing a decent job. I would bet they probably go a little topsy turvy. Win a game they shouldn't. Lose a game they shouldn't. End up finishing in that range that we were talking, 7-5, 8-4, something like that. So I think probably it's not a terrible season for BC, but I don't see them really, finishing strong and getting into representative for Sun Bowl or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I do think this NC State game is a bit of a measuring stick game. I think they very well could beat NC State if they slow the game down. Run the ball really well. They got Florida State as well. That can bring them to 6 wins. They have Syracuse. Virginia Tech is a swing game. Georgia Tech, they probably beat Georgia Tech even on the road. I'd say this team looks like an 8-4, maybe 9-3 team, best case scenario. And that's, I'd say, without beating NC State. So I mean, I think in that scenario, if they're 9-3, I'd say maybe they do get sent to the Holiday Bowl, because opening a spot in the Fenway Bowl. But I feel like the only team that the ACC could logically send to the Holiday Bowl this year would be Clemson, because I guarantee Clemson fans would travel very well for that game, or they couldn't, or they would not, because of the team's poor performance this year. But I'm leaning more towards that they would travel. They do get sent to the Holiday Bowl, and not Boston College. But it would be hard to turn out a 9-3 Boston College team, which I think that's very well within reach. Yeah.
Yeah, like we were saying, and I mean, across college football, this whole season has been pretty crazy, but the ACC in particular. So anything could happen. I'm just lamenting it. I feel like if Dracovic were not injured, BC would be maybe undefeated, would be sitting, like we'd be looking at, BC's in the front runner for winning the ACC, and we'd be talking, college football playoff maybe even, which I think would have been overrated for BC, but just on the strength of them being undefeated. So bummer, big time bummer for what could have been a really magical season up there in Chestnut Hill. But oh well, them's the breaks. That's how it goes with a violent game like football.
Yeah, very, very poetically said. I don't have much else to add to that. Yeah, I think that goes over all the notes that we had this week. I think the biggest game, in my humble opinion, in Northeastern football is Army, Wisconsin. Granted, that does not have much bowl implications, but they are tied to an ESPN bowl this year. If Army finds a way to beat Wisconsin, and then say they lose one more game to Wake Forest, put them at 10-2, do you see them landing in one of the more prestigious ESPN bowls? Because typically what happens is Army always gets stuck in the Armed Forces Bowl, and most projections have them going against Boise State in the Armed Forces Bowl. But with the 10-2 record and a win over Wisconsin, do you see them upping their bowl prospects? Or are they sort of destined for the lower end bowls of the bowl chain?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Army kind of has typically a difficult path with their schedule, and obviously being independent, to get into one of the more top tier bowls. At 10-2 with losses only to Wisconsin and Wake. I don't see why not, honestly. I think we might be even talking a little bit of like sniffing top 25 buzz there. And I think that'd be a tempting draw for one of the higher level ESPN bowls. It's a national brand at that point.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the list of the bowls, if it's a higher end bowl, I would say the Birmingham Bowl would probably be like the ceiling for an Army team that would go 10-2, maybe even 9-3, because that game against Liberty, against Malik Willis and company, that it's not looking like I guess a great game for Army's defense, a great matchup, especially after Drew Plitt and company tore up the Army defense a week ago. I'd say the Birmingham Bowl is a ceiling with a 10-2 record. Who they'd play, I gotta think it would probably be like a team from the American though. If they do spare a team, I have seen projections for Coastal Carolina going to that bowl against LSU. Very interesting matchup. It almost feels like an AFL versus NFL vibe with like a Sun Belt team playing an SEC team in a bowl game. I almost get that AFL versus NFL vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, I guess on the higher end of the bowl chain, I would say maybe even the Gasparilla Bowl. They have a tie-in with the ACC and the SEC, so I can see them probably playing on Miami if Miami gets bowl eligible, or whoever is 6-6 in the ACC, whether it be Duke or I guess in the SEC side, maybe like in Missouri. So I don't know, that'll be a headline to see, but I feel like Army at the moment is destined for the Armed Forces Bowl, which they're projected to play against Boise State, which is a dream matchup in my opinion. The toast of the group of five for so long.
Yeah, honestly, of all the teams that you just mentioned, I think I would most like to see Army versus Boise State. So that might be the dream scenario anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, Army hasn't played a Power 5 school in a bowl since 96 against Auburn in the Independence Bowl. And then they would have played last year if the Pac-12 didn't bow out. I really think that if USC would have won the Pac-12 title game, then I think Oregon would have been in the Independence Bowl. Yeah, with Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. But I mean, I have my grievances with USC. I'm kind of glad they're doing bad this year after bowing out a bowl season and doing that to Army. But yeah, they haven't won a Power 5 bowl game since 85, the 85 Peach Bowl against Illinois. I mean, like those chances don't come often. I want to say it's possible this year, especially like looking at some of these projections too, like with Wyoming being projected to go to the Gasparilla Bowl at times. I mean, just a really random projection to have, I guess. I mean, I heard Wyoming travels well. I heard that they drank all the beer in the Arizona Bowl, but I just don't think they traveled that well to Tampa Bay. But who knows? Who am I to know? I mean, maybe Wyoming fans will see this and they'll see it as a challenge I just posed to them. Who knows?
Maybe. Honestly, though, I know you're an Army guy, so you speak to it more than myself. But to me, I think it's more prestigious to get a win if indeed they could pull off the win over Boise State than to a fair amount of Power 5 teams, honestly.
I mean, in any other year, I would agree, but Boise State looks destined for a 7-5 record, even with that win against BYU. So I mean, it's like I'm not dissing Boise State as a program, but if it were like 2018, 2019 Boise State, then I'd be more ecstatic. But it's Boise State in a down year.
Yeah, but 4 or 5 years from now, nobody's going to remember it was Boise State's down year. Unless they fall off a cliff, then it won't look that good. But if they continue being Boise State, then they'll be like, oh yeah, did you know that Army beat Boise State in 2021? Whatever Armed Forces Bowl.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I mean, I guess here's to hoping that Boise State doesn't fall off a cliff, which I don't think they will. I mean,
they haven't yet.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I mean they're the class with all the advantages they have in the Mountain West in terms of money and television revenue. I just don't see it happening in terms of competition wise in football. I mean they have their own TV deal aside from the Mountain West. Like that is such an advantage to schools like UNLV and even San Jose State, the defending champs. Like, I mean, huge advantage right there. So I don't see them falling off the cliff. But yeah, I mean that's a great point.
Yeah, well we'll see. I mean. Big 12, if they decide to open up another round of expansion, it's probably Boise State and Memphis are the first two calls that they make. So if that happens, then they're a Big 12 team, and even if not, then I think they're probably in a pretty good spot as they have been in the Mountain West for years now. So.
No, I absolutely. I mean, in a position to dominate. Yeah, I think that caps all of the bowl discussion heading into week 7. John, do you have anything final to add?
No, just hoping for a good prognosis and speedy recovery for Sean Clifford.
Oh, yep. Same here. I mean, yeah, because it'll shake up the whole bowl picture in an interesting way. But it would just be a shame for a great season like that to be derailed by one injury. But like you said, football's a violent game, and it happens.
And it does.
Yeah, I guess on that somber note, I guess we'll close this Northeastern Bowl Rush heading into week 7. Thanks again, John, and peace, love, and soul.